It is Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025, first day of spring. Been raining a lot today, but it is what it is. Before I get into some interesting videos regarding JFK and Nelson Mandela, stuff that I wasn't quite aware of, some of the stuff. But anyways, with JFK, there's so much content out there, and I was able to get the really important stuff with what actually happened that day specifically and who was involved down to less than 19 minutes. It was really friggin' hard. And of course I'm going to be missing things because again, there's hundreds of thousands of hours worth of data to look through. And I've been looking through, and again, a lot of the stuff that I've seen on the information that has been released, and I've gone through thousands of pages at this point, and I'm seeing a lot of fabricated information, a lot of redundant information that's not required. And again, I will reiterate, this is all stuff that was already scrubbed by the CIA. This was even admitted after the Warren report and stuff like that, which took a few years. The Chief Justice at the time, Warren, lied, admitted that he lied, even under oath, and countless others as well. But I digress. I'll get into my social media stories first. So Cat Turd was talking about, it's an interesting handle, talking about getting swatted. And so a lot of people are talking about that now. And I've been swatted before as well. And again, this stuff is just disgusting. And for some reason, it seems to be a certain radical demographic that seems to like to do this the most. And this is why people like Bill Hicks got murdered, right? And so the people that do this, you're absolutely disgusting to me. And it does cause a lot of harm, a lot of stress, a lot of fear in people. And so I know that's your aim. Your aim is crazy enough to like make people shoot at people, which to me is crazy. But again, what do you expect for the people that are burning down Tesla dealerships, that are throwing their feces or their animal feces on Teslas, even people that are Kamala Biden supporters and stuff like that, like from your own team? And it's been very interesting, trying to drive people off the road. There's countless other things that I'm missing here, but it's been absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, swatting, don't do that. That's for losers. Okay, and you're needlessly harming people and putting even law enforcement's lives at risk as well. So what the heck is wrong with you? And these are the same people that talk about defunding the police, and they're the first to call when they get 9 chicken McNuggets, at a McDonald's when it's supposed to be 10. It is what it is. But anyways, this may be, actually want to see first if I'm even, okay, good, I'm off mute. Oh, it's not even showing. Here we go. Sorry, it's been a long day. I just got back not too long ago. This is going to be controversial for people, but it is what it is. So this is from DC Drano. Again, not everything he shares is legit, but no one's perfect. And so to everyone that has stood strong against American involvement in the Ukraine war since day one, you have been vindicated. We knew Ukraine was a corrupt playground for our deep state. He's talking about Burisma, biolabs. There's so much more than that. So much money laundering, corruption, weapons being sold on the black market to people that literally hate us in Western countries, and so much more kickbacks. And we knew Putin's red line was Ukraine joining NATO, and Biden Kamala pushed for NATO expansion. And we knew it was a money laundering operation for DC insiders, international insiders, left and right, same bird, just like Ford, just like so many others. So now even legacy media is admitting the truth. So now finally, legacy mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, is they're finally sharing more of the facts, right? There was a staged and planned coup that happened even in 2014 in Ukraine, and there has been a genocide and targeted attacks on people that are Ukrainian and Russian, but in these regions, they're talking about these regions of conflict, and there are people from there that did actually want to be a part of Russia, a large amount. And there were people that were getting indoctrinated and brainwashed into killing their own. Because again, it's the same friggin' blood, guys. Like the Soviet only collapsed, whatever you want to call it, in 91. And I know you guys have been fighting with each other for a very long time, especially Holodomor. Like that's one example where, millions of Christian Ukrainians got murdered. But again, this was government. People within the Ukrainian government are corrupt, and the experts and these war mongers and industrialists they're dealing with, these oil tycoon leaders, these the Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BlackRock, JP Morgan, General Dynamics, I can name these friggin' organizations, and it caused a genocide in Ukraine of Ukrainian people. There's a lot of Russians as well that have died, but this is the fault of Putin, and it's the fault of Zelensky, and it's the fault, unfortunately, of NATO as well, who are also escalating tensions and trying to blame it on Russia, and in fact not being Russia. So I've given so many different examples before about the ghost of Kiev not being real, about the Ukrainian soldiers valiantly dying on Snake Island. That did not happen. About the Polish farmers dying. This was Ukrainian air defense. Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 blowing up, one completely. This was NATO and Ukrainian assets. And there's so much more to talk about. But these were going to get us into a world war. And now Trump, actually, maybe I'll stop this for now, but now Trump might be getting us involved in a war. I saw this coming. No offense to people. This was one of the red flags, right? He is very much, I wouldn't say Israel first because people are getting impacted there as well, but there's absolutely a genocide going on in Palestine right now of innocent civilians. I will reiterate that. And a large majority of the deaths are children, ladies and gentlemen, and women. And then it's men. And and for many years, people within NATO and government institutions within the Western countries, they are funding what they're calling NGOs and charities and foundations and this and that and you name it, in order to assist people within these countries because of what's going on with these various different conflicts. And they are going to people that are radical extremists. They are like instigating, and they're being paid instigators. This happens all the time. And if you think the CIA and the FBI and Mossad and Canadian intelligence agencies like CSIS and Global Affairs and stuff like that, if you think they're not involved in this stuff at the higher levels, the people that are duped, like if you think they're not doing this, then I don't know what to tell you anymore. And so yeah, he's still funding that, and he's talking about possibly going into a world war, and Iran, they have a treaty with Russia, and so now if there's any kind of involvement from NATO into Iran, then that's going to trigger a world war, and it's going to include Russia and possibly China. And again, where's Canada in all of this, right? And Canada, like I can't even talk about this right now. We have a global elitist that's the current prime minister. I can't even believe this, and he is like deep state. He is deep state, Bilderberg, all of that stuff. Like this guy is in it. And he wants us to join the EU. Like we fought wars. My family has been in Canada for hundreds of years. Like we were like early settlers. I'm talking about like as early as the 1400s, and even procreated with an indigenous, prominent indigenous woman who was actually, she was actually half indigenous, half, oh my God, what's his name again? Nicole. Anyways, a famous explorer and stuff like that. And like he ended up settling in the US, like a really famous guy. And anyway, he's part of my lineage as well. But hundreds of years, we have fought wars to cut the ties from Britain and France and stuff like that. Like we are our own country, right? And so why does he want us to get re-involved? And by the way, that'll be more taxpayers' dollars. That's going to be more governance. All right, it's going to be international governments, and so we like. Why would we want to be a part of that? Like this is, especially now, this is absolutely ridiculous. The prime minister, the leaders in the UK, like they are bought, like they are puppets. France, the same thing. And yeah, and Trump, he's really yeah, he's going to enable this. Like and so all of his promises out the friggin' window. Nothing matters anymore because he's going to get us all involved in a fucking war, and he should not be funding this, right? This is not about Israel. This is about people that are corrupt from within, like Netanyahu, who I've already talked about countless times, that even in 2002 was lying about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which got us all involved in wars in the Middle East. And again, this profited just like World War I and World War II. The people at the top are the ones that are heads of the banking systems, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Clintons and the Bushes. These people that have the shell companies, like the petro companies and stuff like that. And anyways, I wish this stuff would get more. And then Pierre Poilievre, he's like fully in support of these proxy wars as well, like not realizing this impacts Canada. It impacts like we can't afford to send more money to these proxy wars. No one on either side is benefiting except for the people at the top. And these people are more beholden to their shareholders and stockholders, whatever you want to call them, and people that to preserve their own inherited wealth and assets. And if you think that we're part of the club, but they want to work with us, cooperate, you are absolutely wild at this time. Like I'm going to hate to break it to you, but people need to peacefully speak out on this stuff. People like Joe Rogan, like the big names, they need to start talking about this stuff more, addressing this stuff more, having uncomfortable conversations, but respectful. because this is we are at pivotal times, ladies and gentlemen, and they don't want the moon landings being faked to come out. Because again, even with NASA and General Dynamics and Raytheon and Lockheed, they make so much money off of pushing that, right? So much propaganda has been put into this as well, like Star Trek and Star Wars and so many other, like even Disney and Netflix now and you name it. So anyways, very interesting times. So I'll carry on. Yeah, so Carney, he's deep state, so he's starting to get ahead in the polls, which is terrifying. This is just climate change stuff. Yeah, so Toronto and Hamilton are now statistically more dangerous than Detroit. That's Canada now. Yeah, people think that it takes years for damage to be done. You're absolutely wrong. More Tesla graffiti and stuff like that. They're going to go to jail and get charged. Like, I don't understand. Like, how is that even worth it? Oh, yeah, this was interesting too, but maybe not for you. Okay, so this is an interesting take on Mahmoud Khalil. Candace Owens.
It's a complicated one here because you and I.
Because I was actually firmly like on the side of like, you know what, this guy needs to be deported, blah blah blah. Like he has been extreme in his social media posts, all this stuff, and the more I'm looking into it, the more I'm kind of siding with Candace on this. Like I need more facts. And again, I'm not even American, so it doesn't even matter. But it is important that people are able to have free speech. And if he hasn't said anything that has been meant to incite violence, like the call to arms and stuff like that, like these are absolutely like threats and escalations. But if he's not involved in any of that stuff, then it needs to be reconsidered, right? Because the people that people want to deport immediately, like the primary ones, are the rapists, the murderers, the drug traffickers, the human organ traffickers, etc.
I'm big supporters of free speech.
It's never going to be perfect.
This guy is married to an American woman who's 8 months pregnant with their child. He's a permanent US resident with a green card. He was leading these protests on the campus, but he doesn't seem to have engaged directly in illegal acts himself. But I thought Marco Rubio had a good point when he said, had he put down his support for Hamas, for example, which this group have definitely done, been very vocal in support of him, had he put that on his application for the green card, it probably would have been rejected on that ground. And so why wouldn't they have the right now to kick him out, given he's on a green card and he, hid these views until he made them public?
The AP, I don't know if you know this up into the minute, but the AP has debunked that. He was actually not a part of the organization CUAD. And in fact, the video is now making the rounds of him from April of last year when he comes out and speaks to the press and says, I'm not a member or affiliated with CUAD. I'm actually here just trying to facilitate negotiations between the university and the CUAD organization. So thus far, and this is at least up to the minute from the AP, and also from his own mouth before he could have possibly known he was going to be arrested 1 year later, he's not affiliated with this organization. So there's a lot of lies that we're kind of have to sort through of people that are warring. I'm very open, as I've said from the beginning. If it is proven that he was a part of any organization or if he personally handed out a pamphlet that was about violence, you would have me on board. I am consistent on the fact, and I don't know why they didn't just pick, there were plenty of students who got violent, who broke the law, who were arrested. Why did we make him the poster child for this? This was, to me, just an unforced error. There were so many students to choose from, and they chose this person who hasn't been arrested for anything, doesn't appear to be a part of CUAD, and also isn't here on a short-term visa. He has a green card. He is a United States resident. And that upsets me, obviously, because I am married to a Brit. He is here on a green card. And so it is important for me to know what was why was this decision determined? What are the actual facts? Because if you don't think we're going to get bit by this when the Democrats have power, we almost did. We did get bit by this with January 6th. if I had been there that day, would my husband have just been deported
Oh my
because, well,
God.
she's here and we don't
Right?
like these viewpoints that are being espoused on January 6th. So we're just going to deport and ask no further questions. I need them to provide us with something concrete as to why they pursued him and not the many other students who were actually breaking the law that day.
Well, certainly it's interesting about the CUAD because I didn't know that update on that. And that does change it because it seems to me all the reasons to deport him they've been putting out there are to do with him fronting this organization, which has been very vocal in espousing pro-Hamas sentiment, in talking about violence being the answer and so on. If he genuinely is not a paid up member of this group and has, never been, that's a very different situation.
I actually just need the facts. And people that are saying, oh, we shouldn't be privy to them. Let's be very clear. The White House chose to make him the poster boy.
Yeah.
The White House chose to post Shalom. So now we're all interested and we want the facts, and people are going, well, we don't have them or we're not ready to give them. That to me doesn't pass the sniff test. And again, the reason why I'm angry about this is only because, or I'm fired up about it rather, is only because I can just see us getting bit by this when Trump is out of office and the Democrats are in power.
I think.
Yeah, these are all great points. I'll be the first to when I'm aware of it, like correct myself when I've been wrong. So I really had to do more research into it and before talking, I think for in this case. And I did want to talk about January 6th as well. I just want to be clear that I'm not I have never in any way, and neither has anyone I know actually, promoting or justifying any kind of violence that happened on January 6th. And I have been on social media about that since day one, when I was calling this out for being a staged and planned event where there were government embeds and instigators within the crowds and crisis actors that were paid, civilians even acting as government, and people caught off guard, people just thrown to the friggin' in the lion's den, and then even law enforcement using, unnecessary, I would say, use of force towards people. There were absolutely people that were lying about deaths that did not happen. So many, I've shared that, and the questionable deaths in conjunction with that. Questioning, is Ashley Babbitt still alive? I have footage regarding that I've shared over the years as well. David Lazarus, Harry Dunn, and countless others lied under oath. These are law enforcement. These are people that swore an oath to serve and protect, and they lied. And these were leftist people that were promised political positions and things like that, and opportunities, for just going that way and lying about this. People went to jail for this. People that were not even part of that January 6th protest, which was largely peaceful, and this was over embellished and exaggerated and sensationalized in the news. And for that reason alone, these mainstream media outlets that are not correcting themselves and apologizing and then talking about the facts now, this is why they're losing. This is why their views are at record lows. People don't take them seriously. People don't believe what they say. And this is left and right, mainstream media, legacy media, whatever you want to call it. And, but they need to correct themselves, and they're not doing that. So if they would be willing to do that stuff and actually have an unbiased, fact-based news reporting program, then maybe more people would listen in. And so even CBC, they're always so leftist and liberal, NDP focused, because they, especially liberal, obviously, because they know that that's where they get all these bailouts. Government, taxpayers' money. So our money, they're getting paid, and they have a bias towards a political party because they know that that's where they get the most money from. And to me, that's disgusting. And most people in Canada know that. All right. Look at the polling from before Mark Carty, Bilderberg, types started investing millions of dollars in marketing and campaigns to get, Mark Carney higher in the polls. It's terrifying. But these people within these news organizations, they would actually have a decent amount of money. It would be in between, in the middle of what liberals versus conservatives would be willing to spend, invest government / state funded friggin' money and state funded media. This is the conflict of interest is just unreal, and we saw that during the whole pandemic, especially, right? And we lost people. And there's so much almost irreparable damage that has happened in Canada right now on so many different levels: physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you name it, academically, physically. I don't know if I already mentioned those things, but and economically. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so if they'd be more honest and stop lying to people, they wouldn't have to worry about not having a job possibly when the conservatives come in, because that's why they keep on wanting liberals to be in the top, right? And this is anyway why they keep on promoting corrupt, criminal, bias, dictator type tyrant people. because they want the money. Anyway, being redundant. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, if they were just good people, then they would just not have to be worried about their jobs. And this is because I have voted for Liberals, Conservatives, and PPC. I voted PPC in 2021. I have not been shy to say that. Maxime Bernier was the only one that had a solid platform, and he was the only one that was trying to end the lockdowns, the mandates, and talking about the forced inoculations being criminal, and there was not having informed consent. Talking about the immigration issues we're dealing with. Absolutely not a racist, but that was being painted as one because he was talking about the increase in crimes, the issues with housing, all of this other stuff, our economy, not being able to afford it, et cetera, and just being either censored, deplatformed, or just painted as some kind of a Nazi. And but I was listening to his conversations and his interviews that he was having with people like Dr. Jordan Peterson, et cetera, and he came across as very articulate, very well educated, seemed like a really genuine person, and was trying to address Canadian issues.
Once a country.
And he's the only person, by the way, that is not talking negatively about Trump right now, which is what we need. We have someone that is going to be willing to work with Trump, be difficult, and then try to have like a good hand, a good poker hand. And we do have assets and resources that we can leverage more than what Trump is saying. And so anyway, but he has like a better approach at handling this trade war or whatever you want to call it, and he's bringing out the hypocrisy and the points about the carbon tax and the increase in insurance and our mortgages, our rent, our energy, our food bills, all of this stuff have been increased significantly, incrementally over the years, and no one had a problem with that.
Yields its energy.
We have not
Once
done it.
a country yields its agriculture.
Wrong
Once
again.
a country opens itself up to a subsidy war with the United States
Wrong
on
again.
terms of definition, then the political ability of this country to sustain the influence of the United States to remain as an independent nation, that is
Mr.
lost
Turner,
forever,
Mr.
and that's
Turner,
the issue of this election.
Mr. Turner, I today, sir, as a Canadian, believe genuinely in what I am doing. I believe it is right for Canada. I believe that in my own modest way, I am nation building because I believe this benefits Canada and I love Canada.
We built a country, east and west and north. We built it on an infrastructure that deliberately resisted the continental pressure of the United States. For 120 years, we've done it with one signature of a pen. You've reversed that, thrown us into the north-south influence of the United States, and will reduce us, I'm sure, to a colony of the United States, because when the economic levers go, the political independence is sure to follow. Once a country yields its...
Yeah, and so he was right. So there have been great liberal leadership in the past. We don't have anyone now. I will say, and we've had great people from like the conservative side as well, and NDP, and Bloc and PPC. And so like people need to be a little bit more open-minded in their voting and who they're voting for, and actually listen to them talk, because Mulrooney was absolutely incorrect in this. And what has happened is we are more reliant on the US and other countries in order to sustain ourselves than cooperating from within and having progress and development within, accessing our own resources properly and sharing the wealth internally. And Quebec, like, not wanting to be part of that pipeline deal or harnessing energy from their own friggin' province. This is my friggin' province. Like, I was born and raised in Quebec, and I'm embarrassed, but we'll take, all these equalization payments from like the oil producing provinces in Canada, like Alberta. It's just so hypocritical to me. And I know so many people from Quebec that leave Quebec to go to Alberta to work in the oil fields, the mines, or they're working the fires and stuff like that. And they want work on the east coast of Quebec. Like, people are begging for work. They want this. There's a smaller amount of plants left, like even fishing plants, and like I think there's a cement plant, and people are on waiting lists, and you have to like basically like be on the in order to even work at these places. And they're largely discriminating. So it's like largely just French speaking people. Like if you're English speaking, they like good luck. But anyways, if we had more work in these areas, or opportunities for them to go like more like local, like closer within their own province, this would help. I don't understand like why they don't want to do this. I do know why, because they're in bed with the people that are monopolizing the energy systems right now and the resources.
All right, quick question. Let's just say there was a leftist on the street protesting, whatever they put in, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, Trump's a horrible human, whatever. They're on the street protesting. Someone with a red MAGA hat comes up to that person with a GUN and puts it up to their head for just a brief moment. Would that video, and it was on video, would that video be everywhere on national news? Would it be in the mainstream media everywhere? Probably international news. Yes or no? Okay, now that we know the answer to that, why isn't this video all over national news right now?
Harder, but you need to try less being like somebody you're not and start to humble yourself and be somebody that God made you to be. He didn't make a man to be a woman. He made the man to be a man. He didn't make the woman to be a man. He made the woman to be a woman. And this is the truth. What are you going to do? Come attack me now? I should. Hey, man, it's up to you. If you want to pull that on me,
trans man with a
well, God bless you. So you just threatened me with a gun. You just pulled a gun on my face. Man, Lord have mercy on you. This means that you don't even know who you are. Nope, I still love you. Even though you pulled a gun on me, I still love you. I still bless you.
Please share this video so we can find this lunatic.
Yeah, that was crazy. Unhinged. Oh yeah, paid protesters. I talk about this a lot, but this
Yeah,
again,
I get
show
paid
you.
to be out here.
You get paid to be out here?
Yeah.
Amazing. Just some pack.
You really are getting paid for this?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, definitely. 100% I'm getting paid for this. Yeah, I get paid to be out here.
You get paid to be out here?
Thank you for selling out your country. Like, I wonder how much you're getting. Yeah, some more. Leaked docs show exactly how riots are organized, orchestrated, and funded. So they're saying here leftist NGOs. To me, this is like I'm saying it right here. There's people on the right doing the same thing. So we need to stop being so polarizing, because it's not just the left. It is absolutely the right as well. I want to reiterate that point. Drill it, forget home, and then we'll get to JFK in less than 19 minutes.
As the president's car made the turn onto Houston, government agents who had sworn an oath to uphold their country's democratic principles waited alongside mafia killers to murder their own commander-in-chief. One of the men they were working for, Sam Giancana, said this proved that in reality there was no such thing as white hats and black hats. That notion, he said, was just a sham, a sapstick to.
The one thing I recognized was there are no black hats and there are no white hats. They all conduct themselves the exact same. And very good evidence of that is that the CIA would hire two so-called mafia men, Sam Giancana and John Roselli, to assassinate Fidel Castro. If there's such a difference, you're not supposed to have anything to do with each other. But in essence, the remark is really they're all in bed together. They all do business together.
It was now that Abraham Zapruder pressed the trigger on his 8mm cine camera. Ever since that moment, the world has accepted that what he recorded was the definitive account of what really happened. What people must appreciate is that what they have just seen is not at all what really happened. Had you actually been there on the day, this is what you would have seen. Doesn't that look a great deal more suspicious? So just exactly what did happen during the 10 seconds that Bruder was filmed. To begin with, Dulles, Lansdale, and Atty Phillips had tried to get over the problem of volley fire, blowing the president's head clean off by firing in 4 stages. Stage 1 was meant to be a single shot by Charles Nicoletti into the back of Kennedy's head from the Daltex building some 40 yards behind. Had he succeeded, the plotters would have had a single assassin with one bullet story they wanted. But in his excitement, the mafia assassin squeezed the trigger too soon. His bullet ricocheted off the hard chrome sill of the limo's back seat and struck the curb beneath the overpass, sending up a sharp piece of concrete which scratched James Tague's face. Watch again. We clearly see how this little girl stops running, and her gaze looks directly at where the shot originated and not up at the 6th floor of the depository. It was now that Umbrella Man took over. Standing right at the curbside, it was his job, should the first shot miss, to give a clear visual signal. The target is not injured. The intelligence chiefs knew that if this situation occurred, Kennedy would now be moving rapidly away from the first sniper. They knew the only way to make sure of getting him was to fusillade the car. So a moment later, the two rifles tried to fire from directly in front at exactly the same time, to deceive witnesses into thinking there was only one shot.
You said you'd kill President Kennedy. At the same time, I said I had killed the judge. I said I had killed Kennedy. Well, do you believe Lee Harvey Oswald will kill President Kennedy? We'll get back to that. Alone, without any aid from a rogue agency of the U.S. government, or at least a portion of that agency. I believe you're very naive if you did.
Harrelson's bullet hit JFK in the throat, and another gunman, hiding in a culvert 50 yards away, up in the embankment of the overpass, made the hole in the windscreen, which was later seen by Dr. Evalier Glanges.
Presidential limousine was there. Had been standing there for some time, just watching.
Oh, I really, from my TK fan, hi Don, I might not be here long, just wanted to say hi and I appreciate your efforts.
But it was very clear. It was a through and through bullet hole through the windshield of the car, from the front to the back.
As Kennedy emerges from behind the road sign, his distress is clear, while Governor Connolly remains composed. This single frame of the Zapruder film makes nonsense of the single bullet theory, because it's quite clear both men have not been struck at the same time. Kennedy has now passed through 2 layers of fire and has not been hit in the head. To cover this eventuality, the assassins were given a simple instruction: fusillade the car with everything. So that in the next few moments, the 5 remaining riflemen fired, causing the Secret Service agent riding in the front passenger seat, Roy Kellerman, to report a feeling like a jet-sonic boom as the hail of bullets whistled into the car. It is now more than 3 seconds after Kennedy is hit in the throat that Frank Sturgis misses his target altogether and blows out 5 inches of Governor Connolly's ribs, compressing his lungs and puffing his cheeks, with a bullet which quite clearly struck at far too steep an angle that come from the other end of the depository. In almost the same instant, Eladio Del Valle hit the governor in the wrist, Weatherford fired into his thigh, and Nicoletti's second shot hit the chrome frame of the window. A moment later, the best marksman, Malcolm Wallace, shot Kennedy in his upper back, the bullet strike witnessed and recorded by all the Secret Service men in the following car. Jackie Kennedy starts looking concerned, and yet even now there are no obvious signs that her husband, held upright by his back brace, has been shot twice. The assassins have so far failed to hit him in the head, and it is now that they play the ace up their sleeve. Here we can finally answer the riddle of where on an empty street you can hide a man with a rifle, and how he can manage to shoot a man speeding past him in a limousine. The answer is that he can't. That is why the driver, William Brewer, looked around twice to see whether Kennedy had been hit in the head, and when he saw he hadn't, as dozens of witnesses, including police officers, confirmed, he stopped the car completely.
His orders was to slow down when the rest of the guys.
He's
really the driver of the presidential. And I said, yeah.
His order.
Presidential slow down almost to stop.
It is now that most people have been led to believe that Kennedy was shot in the head by Charles Boyd Harrelson, the sniper standing on the grassy knoll. This is not true. Because if we look at the angle of elevation of a shot from that area, it's obvious that a shot originating from above and right would have pushed Kennedy's head down and left, whereas it's quite clear that his head is knocked upwards and to the left by the impact. So where did that bullet come from? Incredibly, the answer has lain
Up and to the left, not back and to the left.
hidden in the most well-known and iconic image from the assassination of the motorcycle policeman heaving his bike onto its stand. Look now as we freeze frame it here. This is the moment when the whole world was looking up the hill toward the man who had fired from the grassy knoll. But that is not where the police officer is looking. He is looking down into the storm drain, because that is where that shot at a stationary car came from. The shot which all of the well-known assassination witnesses described as coming from behind the picket fence missed completely and ripped up the grass at Jean Hill's feet. She did not even notice, but we know this is true because the FBI told her so. So who were the men who fired unseen from the storm drains on Elm Street? One thing we know is that they were very young and had to be brought into the conspiracy because they had to crawl into a filthy, smelly sewer, something which the older, experienced mafia assassins would never have dreamed of doing. They were basically 2 kids looking for excitement. The first was Curtis Laverne Crayford, also known as Larry Crayford. Formerly CIA, he had worked for Ruby at the Carousel Club, and Ruby had told everyone his name was Lee Harvey Oswald until Lee Harvey Oswald walked in. But while above ground, The world was taking pictures, running and screaming, trying to figure out what had happened. The other young man was stumbling along 400 yards of a reeking, fetid Dallas sewer pipe to emerge from this culvert. And he was not Lee Harvey Oswald, or Roscoe White, or J.D. Tippit, nor even a Cuban or Russian communist. His name was Jack Allen Lawrence. And we know that after stumbling up this bank, he turned up 15 minutes later at the Lincoln Mercury car showroom, where he'd obtained a job with false references, pale, sweating, and, on a hot, sunny day in Dallas, covered in mud. Telling his co-workers, Albert Bogart and Robert Tater, he had been ill that morning, he stumbled into the men's room and threw up, while they, feeling his behavior was suspicious, called the police, who made a record of the entire incident. Back at the plaza, the guilt of the radio men coordinating the gunfire can be seen from their behavior. These two, Orlando Bosch and the Umbrella Man, have a seat, while everyone else runs around them. Bosch makes a report that the hit was successful, then casually walks away. Just like the chief radio coordinator, Jim Hicks, with the radios clearly visible in their back pockets. A few yards away, the CIA's cleanup squad have begun working to remove all evidence useful to a forensic team. Deputy Sheriff Buddy Wolfers is here seen finding the bullet which struck in the grass near the manhole cover. He hands it on to one of the fake FBI men, who pockets it. While this is going on, Rogers, Harrelson, and E. Howard Hunt are discovered hiding in the boxcars of the train which they hoped would be their getaway vehicle, until it's prevented from moving by railway dispatcher and key witness Lee Bowers. They are photographed repeatedly as they are marched to the Dallas courthouse. And we can clearly see in this picture the radio receiver Hunt is wearing in his right ear, which is identical to the receivers worn by those Dallas police officers who were part of the plot. As they walk, they are overseen by Colonel Ed Lansdale, who secures their release and begins to give the press the cover story that this man is the major suspect and that acting alone he shot the president from behind. The truth, as we now know, is that 8 separate snipers, firing 16 shots in 4 separate stages, had tried to make certain of killing the president by hitting him in the head and had failed abysmally. The shooting on the day had been nothing to write home about. A third of all the shots had missed the car completely. Had it not been for the ruse of bribing the driver to brake at a point painted on the curbside, which is still visible, so that Jack Lawrence could shoot Kennedy in the head from just 15 feet away, the president might have survived. So now we must address the question, why does the Zapruder film not show this very obvious setup of the limousine stopping for the headshot? The answer, of course, is that it has been tampered with. In the 1960s, Hollywood special effects teams had developed techniques for masking off segments of film frames to disguise the true movement of figures within the picture. In the Zapruder film, frames have been removed in order to fake a continuous flowing motion, so that we don't see the very obvious setup which dozens of witnesses reported. If you look now at the top of the frame, the doctrine of the film becomes perfectly obvious in the way in which the figures are blurred, and yet the shadows are sharp, which is impossible. This CIA tampering with the evidence becomes even clearer when the Zapruder film is run next to the Orville Nix film taken from the other side. It's easy to see from the way the motorcycles suddenly close on the limousine that it stops completely. And we can see that frames have also been removed from the Nix film by the way in which Agent Clint Hill appears to move sideways while running forwards before leaping on the car. As the mad dash to Parkland Hospital begins, the chief coordinator in the assassination plot, George Herbert Walker Bush, casually relaxes with hands in his pockets at the entrance of the school book depository. Now this is going to be one of those all too familiar Kennedy assassination moments in which people will say, well, yes, it could be him, but how can we be sure? Because we've seen this comparison between the photo taken in Dealey Plaza and one of George Bush in conversation with Richard Nixon during Watergate. This man points out that this person has exactly the same skull shape, exactly the same hairline, chin, and nose as George Bush. He is also wearing the same type of suit, white shirt, and exactly the same type of tie. He is exactly the same height, the same weight. He is wearing clothing which matches down to his shoes, but most importantly, he has a characteristic mannerism of cocking his right wrist when he puts his hands in his pockets. We know from this declassified FBI memo that George Bush was in Dallas, staying at the Sheraton on November 22nd. So can there be any doubt about this person's identity? Surrounded by the corrupt policemen he was coordinating, Bush knew already that if an honest officer should happen to catch one of the assassins, it would, because of what Mark Lane rightly calls plausible deniability, make no difference. Because what would they find? Mafia hoods with prison records as long as their arms? Or contract killers like Charles Harrelson? They certainly wouldn't have found anyone who carried CIA credentials or anyone whose involvement with the government could be traced. But even while he smiled and chatted to his fellow killers, Bush was unaware that the plotters had just made their first big mistake. They knew that they had to forensically control the body from the moment the shots were fired, and the moment Kennedy entered Trauma Room 1, that control had to be relinquished. Although they had CIA agents placed in the emergency unit, these people were not aware of the throat wound, which could hardly be seen because it was so tiny. It was at this moment that all the Dallas doctors and nurses like Aubrey Bell made a mental note of this very obvious sign of a frontal entry shot. One of the Dallas medical team, Dr. Charles Crenshaw, a junior doctor at that time, vividly recalls what the first professionals in the Kennedy killing had to deal with.
The second wound was here in the throat, right above the neckline. It was a small opening, very small, 3 to 5 millimeters, about the size of your little finger. I looked at the wound again. I wanted to know and remember this the rest of my life. And the rest of my life, I will always know the shot.
And also described the portion missing from the rear of Kennedy's head after the impact of the frangible bullet, which hit him in the right temple.
The bullet struck about where and passed about where. From here, through, taking out the back of the occipital part, the back of your head. This was gone.
At approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today, here in Dallas, he died of gunshot wound.
This information soon made its way to the media to contradict this evidence. The cover-up now began in earnest, with the summoning from the Westland Funeral Home of a CIA agent who was known for being the best in the business at reconstructive surgery on cadavers, John Melvin Liggett. This man was actually attending a funeral when he was told of the president's assassination and asked to go to Parkland by the coroner. What he didn't know, as the president's car made the turn onto Houston, government agents who had sworn an oath to uphold their country's democratic principles waited alongside mafia killers to murder their own commander-in-chief. One of the men they were working for, Sam Giancana, said this proved that in reality there was no such thing as white hats and black hats. That notion, he said, was just a sham, as Sam stick to.
The one thing I recognized was there are no black hats and there are no white hats.
So there you have it. You've got all the names. You've got where they were. You've got who was involved. And it doesn't get too much into LBJ and the Dulles brothers and heads of oil companies and stuff like that, or Giacarno, whatever his name is, and Jack Ruby, Bush, people that were involved in staging and planning this. If you want to watch the whole video, I shared that a few days ago. And I've done countless videos on the JFK assassination. Okay, this one is going to be hard for some people. Hello, November. This is going to be hard for some people. Again, this is like, I'm trying to get the best, like within 20 minutes of films that are over an hour. So I'll stop talking.
This truly should have been labeled the First World War. The Transvaal Constitution forced its citizens to go to war, and also those residents who were not citizens but had lived there for more than 4 years. It was due to this law that the Cape Dutch, or Afrikaners, were forced to join the Boers in this fight. They were the first who joined the British inside the Transvaal, about 26,000, and became known as joiners and hands-uppers. There were also some Boers who gave in, but very few. As one can clearly see when looking at the British Parliament records of the time, there would have been no war against the Boer if the Cape Dutch would have joined the Boers. The Boers developed guerrilla tactics to attack the British columns. Every farmhouse was a supply source for the Boers, who could rest up, restock their saddlebags, and go back to fighting. In retaliation, the British instituted a scorched earth policy where they burnt all the farms. About 40,000 farmhouses and barns. Even cattle and sheep were killed en masse. They rounded up the women and children and put them in concentration camps. There were about 67 camps where the Boers were kept. There were also an additional 75 camps that were for the blacks in southern Africa. At the start of the camps, the blacks were put into the same camps as the whites. They were later separated. They were called the Daimak Volk. It means those blacks that worked on the farms, thus not part of those who helped the British fight the Boers. We are always told about the 45 camps for the Boers, but the camps for the blacks were hardly ever mentioned, nor ever known. Why would this be? Does it not fit in with the narrative of blacks versus whites? The people in the camps died of starvation, disease, and neglect. There were about 15,000 blacks. The black people's animals were also killed and their possessions on the Boer farms were burnt to the ground. 50% of the total Boer child population was killed in these camps. This is about 16% of the total Boer population. British agents Jan Smuts and Louis Botha instigated a truce with the British. Both were born British citizens, Smuts in the Cape and Botha in Natal. Before the war, Botha had moved from Natal to the Vryheid Republic, which was part of the Transvaal, so as to be able to infiltrate the Boer ranks. The Second Boer War was ended with the signing of the Treaty of Vereniging. In 1907, after the Boers threatened a third Boer-Anglo War, they were given self-government as mentioned in Article 7 of the Peace Treaty, but they did not have their own and free elections. The treaty stated that the Boers could have self-government, but of course this was just a lie. Smuts and Botha immediately began work on the unification of South Africa, and by 1909 they sent the documents to England where the Parliament approved them. No Boer was ever asked in elections nor referendum regarding this unification. On the 31st of May 1910, the Union of South Africa was institutionalized as per the Union Convention, and the Boers became a minority inside a majority Afrikaner, or Cape Dutch, and English population. The name Cape Dutch, which was used for those white Afrikaans speakers in the Cape, as written by many in many a book worldwide, can be seen even today. They were colonists. This was how the Boers also referred to them. The British, also colonists, lived mainly in the Cape, which they took over from the Dutch, and Natal, which they annexed from the Boers and Zulu. But after 1910, the terminology of Cape Dutch and Boer was replaced with the term Afrikaner. The term Boer seems to disappear overnight, never to be mentioned again. The Native Land Act of 1913 was written by J.B.M. Hertzog, a so-called Boer general who was really Jewish. He was in the governments of Louis Botha and Jan Smuts. The blacks were also given 10 million hectares of Boer soil. This was the first major piece of segregation legislation passed by the Union Parliament. It was replaced by the current policy of land restitution. The act decreed that whites were not allowed to buy land from the natives and vice versa, natives were not allowed to buy land from the whites. After the war, the British opened the borders for the blacks to stream into the Boer republics so they could be used as cheap labor on the mines. The African National Congress was formed in South Africa on January 18, 1912, when a group of Africans, coloreds, and Indians convened a meeting in Bloemfontein to create the South African Native National Congress. The name was officially changed to the African National Congress in 1923. This was initially a moderate movement aimed at improving the status of non-whites in South Africa whose lives had been affected by the Land Act. South Africa officially introduced territorial segregation in 1913. The ANC unsuccessfully petitioned the British government to intervene. Britain did not respond to two subsequent delegations sent in 1914 and 1915. Yet, the ANC continued this reformist approach for much of the 1920s and 1930s. In 1940, ANC President Alfred Zuma aggressively recruited younger members, including Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu. In 1944, the three spearheaded the formation of a youth league committed to more radical strategies to challenge racial segregation and discrimination. On the 14th of December 1960, the UN Resolution 1514 was signed as an international law. The British were also bound by this law, whereby all colonies were to get their independence back unconditionally. Verwoerd and Alfred Beet, the Jew and Afrikaner Broederbonder, turned the South African Union into the South African Republic by instructions from the British, whereby it allowed the further plundering of the Boer Republic's resources by the British and Jews. As time goes on, we start to see Jewish infiltration and subversion of the ANC, and in 1963, it consisted of Lionel Bernstein, Bob Heppel, Dennis Goldberg, Arthur Goldreich, Hazel Goldreich, and James Cantor, with a few African frontmen: Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Raymond Malaba, and Ahmed Kathrada. The ANC followed the model the Jews established when they founded the NAACP in the United States, with the exception that the ANC was a much more violent and openly communist organization. These Jews and their now controlled African National Congress received funding and support from both the Soviet Union and the US CIA. In particular, Ruth First, the Jewish wife of Jewish Soviet KGB Colonel Joe Slovo, a leader of the South African Communist Party, was primarily responsible for funneling funds to this African National Congress. By the 1970s, the Jewish campaign to subvert South Africa was having no effect. The economy was unaffected by sanctions and communist unrest was minimal, though much was made of it in the Jewish-owned elements of the US press. Slovo had been the planner of many of the ANC terrorist attacks, including the 1983 car bomb that killed 19 people and injured many others. Slovo, who had traveled to the Soviet Union many times, was awarded a Soviet medal on his 60th birthday. Slovo is a dedicated communist, a Marxist-Leninist, without morality of any kind, for whom only victory counts, whatever the human cost, whatever the bloodshed. Slovo disputes little of his image as the communist mastermind behind the ANC's armed struggle. For him, the fears of South Africa's whites are both a measure of the ANC's growing strength and a crucial factor in hastening what he believes will be its ultimate victory. Revolutionary violence has created the inspirational impact that we have intended, and it has won for the ANC its leading position, Slovo said. The hatred for whites increased daily, and soon the blacks were singing songs taught to them by Slovo and his radical cohorts about how they were going to kill the Boer and kill the racist.
Hey! Hey! Look out! Hey! Kill the bullets! The racists! Kill the bullets! The racists!
They're still singing that today.
Mr. Mandela, can you tell us how you feel visiting this spot at this time?
It is a very emotional moment for us. That those who are fighting for democracy, for peace, for love among South Africans should be mowed down.
No, they won't.
The world once more turned its back on whites in South Africa and
Brilliant.
told them that if they didn't like it there, they should leave. But where were they to go since the whole world despised them? The ANC tried to convince the public that the MK terrorists were actually freedom fighters. Hotels, restaurants, and many other public places were bombed on a regular basis. Riots would break out across the cities with many killed. In 1983, the Church Street bomb was detonated in Pretoria near the South African Air Force headquarters, resulting in 19 deaths and 217 injuries. The bomb was set to explode at rush hour to maximize casualties of white women, children, and babies. During the next 10 years, a series of bombings occurred in South Africa, conducted mainly by MK. In the 1985 Amanzimtoti bombing of the Natal South Coast, 5 civilians were killed and 40 were injured when MK cadre Andrew Sibusiso Zondo detonated an explosive in a rubbish bin at a shopping center shortly before Christmas. In a submission to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, the ANC stated that Zondo's act, though understandable as a response to recent South African Defence Force raid in Lesotho, was not in line with the ANC policy. Zondo was subsequently executed. In the 1986 Durban beachfront bombing, a bomb was detonated in a bar, killing 3 civilians and injuring 69. Robert McBride received the death penalty for this bombing, which became known as the Magoo's Bar bombing. The subsequent Truth and Reconciliation Committee called the bombing a gross violation of human rights. McBride received amnesty and became a senior police officer. In 1987, an explosion outside a Johannesburg court killed 3 people and injured 10. A court in Newcastle had been attacked in a similar way the previous year, injuring 24. In 1987, a bomb exploded at a military command center in Johannesburg, killing 1 person and injuring 68 personnel. The terror campaign continued with attacks on a series of soft targets, including a bank in Roodpoort in 1988, in which 4 civilians were killed and 18 injured. Also in 1988, a bomb outside a magistrate's court killed 3. At the Ellis Park Rugby Stadium in Johannesburg, a car bomb killed 2 and injured 37 civilians. A multitude of bombs at restaurants and fast food outlets, including wimpy bars and supermarkets, occurred during the late 1980s, killing and wounding many people. The area of Wimpy was specifically targeted because of their perceived rigid enforcements of many apartheid laws, including excluding non-whites from their restaurants. Several other bombings occurred with smaller numbers of casualties. This tactic was abandoned due to the high rate of civilian casualties, especially amongst black laborers. The ANC estimated 30 landmine explosions resulting in 23 deaths, while the government submitted a figure of 57 explosions resulting in 25 deaths. It is a common misconception that the ANC's leader in the 1994 South African elections, Nelson Mandela, had been jailed for his political beliefs. He was in fact acquitted of treason after a 4-year trial, but rearrested a few years later and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for launching an armed insurrection as founder and commander-in-chief of the MK. In his book, Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela says he signed off on many acts of terrorism, including the Church Street Massacre. He told the black youth of South Africa to burn down their schools and refuse to learn Afrikaans, producing a lawless, unemployable generation. But in the rest of the world's eyes, everyone thinks he is a true hero. Mandela conspired not just to bring down the government, he was planning on killing tens of thousands of civilians in his quest for power. He was later charged with 193 counts of terrorism for sabotage and for trying to smuggle, prepare, or manufacture mostly Soviet bloc munitions, including 210,000 hand grenades, 48,000 anti-personnel mines, 144 tons of ammonium nitrate, 21.6 tons of aluminum powder, and 1,500 timing devices. These multiple charges were not trumped-up political charges. In his eloquent closing statement to the court, Mandela candidly admitted his guilt on the charges of sabotage, adding that he was, if need be, prepared to die for his ideals. It was apparent from the huge amount of smuggled explosives that he was not planning to die alone. The judge at his trial commented that personal ambition may well have played a role in his plans. Mandela was never tortured during either of his interrogation or incarceration, as he undoubtedly would have been in a black African nation. Even Amnesty International refused to take on Nelson Mandela's case because they asserted that he was no political prisoner, but had committed numerous violent crimes and had a fair trial and a reasonable sentence. When Mandela was incarcerated, he was given a nice house to live in that was not only comfortable, but luxurious. He had free access to telephone and a fax at the expense of South African taxpayers, which allowed him to organize the ANC from jail. This is why Mandela was still their leader upon being released from jail. He was supposedly in jail for more than 20 years. Not only did he encourage terrorism against whites, but he and his wife Winnie Mandela implemented a torturous practice called necklacing. For any black dissidents, they would have a mob of ANC blacks beat the dissident, put a gas-filled tire around their neck, and light it on fire, all the while making it impossible for the victim to escape. President P.W. Botha told Mandela back in 1985 that he could be a free man as long as he did one thing: publicly renounce violence. Mandela refused.
Disgusting.
The bottom line is that Nelson Mandela never
man.
publicly renounced violence, and we should never forget that. Towards the end of Mandela's time in prison, he began talks with the government. When President Botha suffered a stroke and was forced to resign, F.W. de Pleur took the reins. Mandela and de Pleur made parliamentary moves to pave the way for the ANC to get together and negotiate. When Parliament opened that following February, de Pleur announced that all political parties were to be unbanned and all prisoners released. On February the 11th, 1990, Mandela was freed. Upon Mandela's release from prison, he and Winnie divorced, and he had to pay millions of dollars in settlements. The obvious question is, where did this money come from if he had been sitting in jail for decades? Mandela then moved into an even more luxurious house in Johannesburg, but kept a small shack in Soweto for when he needed to do interviews and appearances. This way he could create the illusion that he was poor when he was anything but that. In 1989, a year before Mandela was freed, Frederick de Klerk, a Freemason with ties to B'nai B'rith, the Jewish Masonic fraternity which controls the ADL, was elected president of South Africa. President Frederick de Klerk was a Jewish-backed candidate with ties to the international Zionist establishment. De Klerk worked for and eventually achieved the Jewish goal of black rule in South Africa. Supposedly competing with the ANC for a say in the future of South Africa were de Klerk's National Party, as well as the rival Inkatha Freedom Party, headed by Zulu Body, led by Chief Buthelezi, as well as conservative white groups who did not want apartheid to end. There was lots of rhetoric from de Klerk and the ANC about finding a way for all South Africans to be equal and live in peace and harmony. The white South Africans were told that they were voting for equality, which is something they deemed important. as they did not wish to rule over the blacks, but simply wanted to preserve their culture and way of life. With a huge increase in terrorist bombings and severe pressure from the rest of the world closing in on them, the populace grew tired of the apartheid state and longed for an end to this, as they considered that the world might open their arms to them again. They did not know that they were voting for their own genocide. If they had known this, they most certainly would not have voted for their inevitable fate of mass killings and rapes. And so convinced they had no other option, the whites of South Africa essentially handed over control of their country to the ANC in 1994. South Africa had moved from the system of apartheid to one of majority rule. Following the election of April 27, 1994, Nelson Mandela was sworn in as South Africa's president. Its cabinet made up of 12 ANC representatives, 6 from the National Party and 3 from the Inkatha Freedom Party. Thabo Mbeki and F.W. de Klerk were made deputy presidents. The world rejoiced at the end of apartheid. We were told that South Africans were going to be living hand in hand in a wonderful rainbow nation. But while blacks appeared to rule, it was Jews in key positions. When Nelson Mandela's ANC took over South Africa, Slovo was named Minister of Housing, Helena Dolny, the Jewish ex-wife of Slovo, ran the land bank, Ronnie Kasrils, a Jew, was the Minister of Water Affairs and Forestry, Louis Tager, a Jew, was chairman of the railway system, Spornet, Michael Katz, a Jew, was the chief consultant on taxation. Mayor Khan, a Jew, was the managing director of the police service. 3 Jews, Richard Goldstone, Arthur Chaskelson, and Albert Sachs, sat on the South African Supreme Court. Immediately, the government embarked on the Reconstruction and Development Program to address what they deemed socioeconomic consequences of apartheid, which really
And not to go off track, but Elon Musk went to a Jewish school when he was there. He's very much connected to people that are the Zionist Jews, right? And so there are people that claim to be Christian that are not real religious Christians. There's people that are Jewish that believe it's an ethnicity and are secular Jews. There are people that are extremists and that pretend to be Jews and hang around them and exploit that group, but they're actually, I'm saying, Zionists. And so there's red flags with Elon as well.
Just meant a major
not because of that, but because of what he's been into, like the Tesla, SpaceX, AIX, all of this stuff. And he should know that the moon landings were faked. He's faking so much stuff with his rockets and stuff like that as well. And again, a military contractor, biodigital convergence is like his focus as well. Massive surveillance and
operation in wealth redistribution, translating to whites having their small bit of wealth stolen from them and given to blacks. This program was really just an affirmative action policy for the majority of the population, black Africans. Even though whites were the minority, they were oppressed, and blacks, along with other non-white races, were given a leg up over the white minority who were now being targeted for extinction. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa was established in 1996. Mandela's government also established a criminal law code on the European model, abolition of the death penalty, and excessive rights for accused criminals with destructive results. South Africa today competes with Civil War-torn Colombia for the dubious distinction of being the world's most crime-ridden country. Interpol's international crime statistics say it all. In 1999, South Africa had 121 murders and 119 mostly white women rapes per 100,000 inhabitants, compared with Colombia's 69 and 6 respectively, and the United States' 5 and 32. The trends are no more encouraging considering that in 1994, the world's average murder rate was 5.5 per 100,000, compared to South Africa's 45. In such circumstances, and with a slow justice system which only produces a 10% conviction rate, South Africa has seen the rise of vigilante groups filling the void left by an incompetent and violent police, who between the 3 years of 1997 and 2000 killed 1,550 people, compared with 2,700 killed by the apartheid regime in 30 years. This is what the saintly Nelson Mandela helped to usher in. After one term as president, he stepped down in 1999, though he still served as an icon around the world for tolerance and diversity, since all of his crimes before and after coming to power were swept under the rug in the mass media. Mandela was followed by other radicals who oversaw the destruction of a once beautiful and safe South Africa, such as Thabo Mbeki from 1999 to 2008, Kgalema Motlanthe for less than a year, and Jacob Zuma ever since. It was Zuma who announced the death of Nelson Mandela in December 2013. World leaders from all over flew into South Africa to congregate and mourn with Zuma, while the media cried about the loss of such a hero for civil rights. Since then, Mandela has essentially been deified by those who never say anything of his terrorist past or the genocidal policies he implemented. Of course, not making it to the TV screens of the world were the songs of "Kill the Boer, Kill the Racist" that continue to be sung by Zuma and his followers. Zuma is known for being an extremely corrupt leader. He was charged with rape in 2005 but was acquitted. He fought a long legal battle over allegations of racketeering and corruption, which resulted in his financial advisor Schabir Shaik's conviction for corruption and fraud. On April 6, 2009, the National Prosecuting Authority dropped the charges, citing political interference, although the decision has been challenged by opposition parties, and as of 2016, the matter is still before the courts. After extensive state-funded upgrades to his rural homestead at Nkandla, the public protector found that Zuma had benefited improperly from the expenditure, and the Constitutional Court unanimously held in 2016's Economic Freedom Fighters versus Speaker of the National Assembly that Zuma had failed to uphold the country's constitution, resulting in calls for his resignation and a failed impeachment attempt in the National Assembly. This is par for the course of South African governance in the post-apartheid era. Corruption is rampant at all levels, from the politicians to the police. The police are comprised of mostly Black Africans who are hostile towards whites and treat the whites unfavorably. They do not care about solving crimes committed against white people or in stopping Black-on-Black violence either, and are simply opportunists looking to gain riches easily. Just as any concerned citizen under attack would do, the whites will call the police when they are being broken into or stolen from, but the police are just as corrupt as the thieves. They will cover for the criminals and look the other way while whites are being targeted. Now the country has regressed to third world status in a matter of years. The situation only continues to get worse for all residing in South Africa. South Africa went from being a beautiful first world country with top-of-the-line hospitals and a very high standard of living for not only whites, but blacks as well, to a third world hellhole. Before the end of apartheid, work was plentiful for both blacks and whites. Their streets were safe. Now everything is falling apart. Due to enforced affirmative action laws where non-whites are given preferential treatment, despite their capabilities to perform the job, South Africa has experienced a rapid decline in all of its industries, military, and infrastructure, with rolling blackouts where the power will be shut off for hours at a time. This happens almost daily. This is now commonplace in Black-run South Africa, posing yet another security risk to South Africans. If white South Africans have a bit of money, they can barricade them.
There's huge food shortages right now because they're murdering farmers, innocent people, raping and murdering like kids also. And it's just absolutely disgusting, torturing these people. Like, you have no idea how disgusting this has been, even keeping them alive for days and having it where the father is witnessing like kids and his wife getting raped and tortured and sodomized. And like, it's just so, and then being kept alive in order to remember this stuff. If people knew the reality of the world, I'm telling you, oh my God, it's just a mess. And so it's being redundant because this stuff is happening all over the place, that these elitist types have their friggin' tentacles in, just literally everywhere. And this is a contained environment that's being projected on a flat surface. Anyway, that's it for today. And so on that note, I will leave it at that. And I'm going to watch that video that was sent to me about flat earth stuff, because it's I noticed it was Mark Sargent. And so, yeah, he has good stuff. So I'm going to watch that. And so I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.